My name is Elena, and for 30 years, I was the responsible disappointment. You know the type, right? The one who doesn't make waves, the one who stays in the background, the one whose life is just a series of safe choices that my family, well, they mostly just ignored. This past Thanksgiving, my family finally realized that while they were busy polishing my sister's halo, I was busy building a kingdom they weren't invited to rule. The turkey was being carved, the gravy was steaming, and my mother, Margaret, was in peak form. She leaned across the table, her diamonds catching the candlelight, and looked at me with that pitying squint she's perfected over 3 decades. Elena, darling, she said, her voice loud enough to silence the room, your sister Chloe just closed on that gorgeous estate in the Hamptons. It's 6 bedrooms. Can you imagine? When are you going to stop wasting your life in that hobby of yours and find some real stability? Chloe, sitting right next to her, didn't even look up from her wine. She just smirked, a tiny, sharp expression that said everything. Yeah, Elle, she added, swirling her vintage red. Not everyone can live on potential forever. At some point, you have to actually be someone. The table went dead silent. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they all looked down at their plates, waiting for me to do what I always did, waiting for me to laugh it off, make a self-deprecating joke, and shrink back into the wallpaper. But this year, something was different. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I looked at my mother, then at my sister, and I felt a strange, cold clarity. I smiled. Not the I'm sorry smile I'd worn for years, but a slow, deliberate grin that made my mother's brow furrow in confusion. I am someone, Mom, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I just didn't think you'd be interested in the details, since they didn't involve Chloe's press releases. My mother's face turned a shade of pink that almost matched the cranberry sauce. Every fork in the room froze. They were staring at me like I'd just started speaking a foreign language. If you think that moment came out of nowhere, you're wrong. It was the result of a lifetime of being the other daughter. The one who was always just fine. It all began in a drafty 2-story house in a suburb of Connecticut. My father, Richard, was a man of few words and even fewer emotions. He was an actuary, a man who lived and breathed risk assessment. And early on, he and my mother assessed that I was a low-yield investment. Chloe was 4 years older, and she was everything. She was the cheerleader, the prom queen, the girl who could talk her way out of a speeding ticket before she even had a license. She lived for the spotlight, and my mother was her head of PR. I remember my 12th birthday. I had spent months working on a series of charcoal drawings. I was so proud of them. I'd set them up in the living room, hoping, praying for a good job, Elena. My mother walked in, glanced at the sketches for 2 seconds and said, "That's nice, Elle, but did you hear? Chloe got the lead in the school play. We have to go find her address. Can you clean this up before the guests arrive? It looks a little messy." Messy. My heart, laid bare on paper, was just clutter in the way of Chloe's triumph. That was the pattern. My straight A's were expected. Chloe's C+ was a triumph of effort. My quiet hobbies were quirks. Chloe's whims were passions. When it came time for college, the disparity became a chasm. Chloe wanted to go to an expensive private art school in California. My parents didn't hesitate. They dipped into savings, took out loans, and threw a going to gold party. When it was my turn, 3 years later, the conversation was different. "Elena," my dad said, tapping his calculator. "Things are a bit tight with Chloe's tuition and her lifestyle in LA, maybe a state school, or better yet, a local community college for 2 years. You're so practical. You'll make it work." Practical. That was the word they used to describe my lack of worth. So, I did what I always did. I made it work. I worked 3 jobs while taking 20 credits a semester. I learned how to restore antique furniture in a dusty workshop on the edge of town, a hobby my mother scoffed at. I didn't tell them when I started my own boutique restoration firm. I didn't tell them when I started consulting for high-end auction houses in New York City. Why would I? Every time I tried to share a win, it was met with, "That's good, Elle, but Chloe just got a job at a top-tier marketing firm." Before we get into how I started living a double life that would eventually blow my family's minds, I have to ask, have you ever been the invisible child? The one who did everything right but still felt like background noise while a golden child got all the credit? If that's you, drop a heart in the comments right now. I want to see how many of us are out there. Now, back to the story. By the time I was 27, I was living a double life. To my family, I was Elena, the girl who lived in a tiny, cramped apartment in the city and messed around with old wood. In reality, I was Elena Vance, the lead consultant for a major decorative arts division. I lived in a sprawling, light-filled loft in Tribeca that I'd bought with cash 3 years prior. I had a portfolio of investments that would make my father's actuary heart skip a beat. But I kept the facade. I'd show up to family dinners in my oldest sweaters, driving my beat-up 10-year-old sedan. I let them pay for my meal, listening to them lecture me on saving for the future. The contrast was staggering. Chloe was thriving in the city too, or so they said. Every dinner was a monologue about Chloe's new car, Chloe's designer bags, Chloe's high-stakes career. "She's just so busy," my mother would sigh dramatically. "She's a director of operations now, you know. She barely has time to breathe. Elena, you're so lucky you have all that free time with your little crafts." I'd just nod and eat my salad. I knew the truth. I'd seen Chloe's operations. A year ago, I was at a gala for a major museum. I was dressed in a custom silk gown, dripping in vintage emeralds I'd restored myself. I was talking to the CEO of a major tech firm when I saw her. Chloe. She wasn't a guest. She was working the coat check. Our eyes met for a split second. She turned pale, her eyes darting around to see if anyone else had seen me. I didn't say a word. I just turned back to my conversation and let her suffer in the silence. I waited for her to tell my parents. I waited for the blowout. But it never came. Chloe was too terrified of losing her golden status to admit she'd been lying for years. Instead, she doubled down. She bought the house in the Hamptons. My mother was ecstatic. She spent weeks planning the success celebration for Thanksgiving. "We're going to Chloe's new place for the holiday," my mother chirped over the phone. "Oh, Elena, it's just majestic. Try to wear something presentable, okay? There might be important people there." I almost laughed. "I'll be there, Mom." The day of Thanksgiving, I pulled up to the estate. It was a beautiful house, sure. But as I walked up the driveway, I noticed things. The lawn was overgrown. The paint was peeling near the eaves. There was a "for rent" sign half buried in the bushes near the gate. Chloe met us at the door, draped in cashmere, clutching a glass of champagne like a lifeline. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her smile was brittle. My mother was already inside, touching the curtains, gushing over the marble. "Look at this, Richard. Our girl has really done it." My father was nodding, looking at the crown molding. "Good investment, Chloe. High resale value." I stood in the foyer, my old coat over my arm. Chloe looked at me, and for a second I saw pure, unadulterated fear in her eyes. She knew I knew. "Nice place, Chloe," I said, my voice light. "The short-term rental market in the Hamptons is really booming lately, isn't it?" Her hand shook. It's not a rental, Elena. Don't be bitter." "Bitter?" I smiled. "I'm just observing. It's a very practical way to look successful." The dinner was an exercise in delusion. My mother spent 2 hours talking about Chloe's genius in real estate. She didn't ask me a single question, not one, until the carving of the turkey. "Elena," my mother said, looking at my simple sweater, "I've been thinking, since you're struggling with your little shop, maybe Chloe could hire you. She needs someone to manage the cleaning staff here. It would be a steady paycheck." The table went quiet. Chloe smirked. My father nodded. And that was the moment the dam broke. If you've ever reached your breaking point and finally decided to speak your truth, smash that like button right now. We're about to get to the juicy part where the secrets come out and the golden child gets a reality check. You don't want to miss what happens next? That's a very generous offer, Mom, I said, setting my napkin down. But I think I'm a little busy. See, I just finished the restoration of a major private collection. The commission alone was, well, it was more than the mortgage on this house. My mother blinked. The what? And as for this house, I continued, looking directly at Chloe, I think the owner might be annoyed that you're hosting a family dinner in his summer rental without paying the holiday surcharge. I actually consulted on the furniture in this living room 2 years ago. I recognized the inventory tags. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. Chloe's glass hit the table with a sharp clack. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. My mother looked back and forth between us, her mouth hanging open. Chloe? My father asked, his voice low and dangerous. What is she talking about? Chloe burst into tears. It wasn't a graceful, golden child cry. It was a messy, snotty, desperate sob. I just wanted you to be proud of me, she wailed. Everything is so expensive. The job. They laid me off 6 months ago. I've been living on credit cards and Mom's emergency fund. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My retirement savings? Chloe, you said that was for a business investment. The investment was her image, Mom, I said, standing up. She's been working coat checks and catering gigs to pay the interest on the cards you co-signed for. My father looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The man of risk assessment had missed the biggest liability in his own home. And Elena? My mother whispered, looking at me like I was a stranger. You have money? You're successful? I've been successful for 5 years, Mom, I said. I tried to tell you at Christmas in 2022. You told me to hush because Chloe was describing her new espresso machine. I tried to tell you when I bought my loft. You told me apartments are for losers and asked when I was going to move back home. I picked up my bag. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done. I'm going home now, I said. To the home I actually own, with the life I actually built. Alone. Elena, wait, my mother cried out, reaching for me. We didn't know. We can celebrate you now. We can have another dinner. I stopped at the door and looked back. No thanks, Mom, I said. I'm not a backup celebration. I'm not the consolation prize for when your favorite toy breaks. You wanted a practical daughter? Well, here she is. I'm practically gone. I drove back to the city that night with the windows down, the cold November air clearing the smell of turkey and lies from my lungs. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to exist. Chloe's empire collapsed within weeks. The rental was vacated, the credit cards were frozen, and she moved back into her old bedroom at my parents' house. My mother still calls me, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and expectation. Elena, honey, Chloe is so depressed. If you could just talk to some of your fancy friends, get her a foot in the door. I don't get angry. I just say, I think she needs to learn how to be practical first, Mom. Just like I did. I still see them on holidays, but it's different now. I don't wear the old sweaters. I don't hide the success. I'm polite. I'm kind. But I am distant. I learned that being the forgotten child gave me a superpower they never saw coming. I learned how to build a foundation without anyone else's tools. If you're out there and you feel like the shadow in your family's bright light, keep building. Keep working in the dark. Because one day, the lights will go out on their performance, and you'll be the only one who knows how to keep the fire burning. You aren't the disappointment. You're the architect. And your empire? It's going to be majestic. To really understand why I kept it all a secret, you have to understand the specific kind of silence that lived in our house. It wasn't a loud, angry silence. It was dismissive. It was the sound of my father's calculator clicking in the den, and my mother's voice rising 2 octaves every time Chloe entered the room. I remember when I was 15, a sophomore in high school. I had spent the entire semester in the woodshop class, while the other girls were focused on the spring formal. I was obsessed with a broken 18th century chair I'd found at a local yard sale for $5. It was a disaster. The legs were wobbly, the velvet was moth-eaten, and the wood was caked in layers of cheap, ugly paint. But beneath that mess, I could see the bones. I spent every afternoon for 3 months in that shop. My hands were always stained with walnut oil and wood glue. My fingernails were short and perpetually dusty. When I finally finished it, it was breathtaking. I'd restored the mahogany to a deep honey gold glow and reupholstered it in a cream silk I'd bought with my babysitting money. I brought it home, beaming. I set it in the entryway, right where everyone would see it. My mother walked in, carrying 3 shopping bags from a high-end boutique for Chloe. She glanced at the chair, used it as a place to dump her bags, and said, "Elena, why is this old thing in the hallway? It's taking up space. Move it to the basement before your sister's friends get here for the pre-dance photos." I didn't say a word. I just carried that chair down to the damp, dark basement. I sat on it in the dark, listening to the laughter upstairs, the sound of camera flashes, the smell of expensive perfume. That was the moment I realized that in this house, my work was clutter. Chloe's existence was the event. So, I started working in the shadows. When it came time for college, as I told you, I was sent to the local state school while Chloe flew off to California on a cloud of my parents' savings. My dad sat me down and actually said, "Elena, you're so resilient. You don't need the bells and whistles Chloe does. You'll find a way to make it work." He meant I was cheap to maintain. He meant I was a safe bet, a low-risk asset. So, I took that safe bet, and I doubled down on myself. I worked 40 hours a week at a high-end antique gallery 3 towns over. The owner, a grumpy old man named Mr. Abernathy, saw me looking at a Louis XIV desk one afternoon and asked me what I'd do to fix the cracked veneer. I didn't hesitate. I told him I'd use a traditional hide glue, a heated veneer hammer, and a specific blend of shellac to match the original patina. He stared at me for a long time, then handed me his keys. "Start Monday," he said. "Don't touch the French pieces until I see you handle a basic shaker table." By my junior year, I wasn't just fixing tables. I was identifying fakes that had fooled veteran appraisers. I had an eye for the truth. Maybe because I'd spent my whole life living with people who only cared about the surface. I started a small side business, Vance Restorations. I didn't tell my parents. When I visited home on the weekends and they asked how school was, I'd just say, "Fine, a lot of reading." My mom would nod, already looking past me at the television. "That's good, dear. Chloe just got an internship at a PR firm in Beverly Hills. She's meeting celebrities, Elena. Can you imagine?" I could imagine. I could also imagine the $5,000 check I had in my pocket from a private collector who'd paid me to restore a set of original Chippendale chairs. But I didn't say a word. I just smiled and asked for the salt. It's crazy how much we can hide when people aren't really looking, isn't it? Have you ever had a secret project or a side hustle that you kept from your family because you knew they wouldn't get it? Or maybe because you wanted it all to yourself? Tell me about your secret wins in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. Now, let's get into the years where the money started getting serious. By the time I graduated, I didn't have a mountain of student debt like Chloe. I had a reputation. I moved to New York City, not to a flashy apartment in Soho like Chloe's future home, but to a tiny industrial space in Long Island City. It was loud, it was dusty, but it had enough square footage for my tools and my workbench. I spent my days in the white-glove world of Manhattan's elite, and my nights covered in sawdust. I remember my first big break. A contact from the gallery told me about a woman on the Upper East Side who had a disastrous inheritance. a collection of mid-century modern furniture that had been stored in a leaky barn for a decade. The local shops told her it was firewood. I walked into that penthouse, wearing my poor student disguise, oversized sweater, worn-out jeans, and the woman looked at me like I was the delivery girl. I was expecting an expert, she said, her nose wrinkled. I am the expert, I said, putting my toolkit on her marble floor. And if you want to save these Wegner chairs, you'll let me work in the service hallway so I don't get dust on your Ruggiano sofa. She was so shocked by my bluntness that she let me stay. I worked for 3 weeks straight. I didn't just fix them. I brought them back to life. When she saw the finished pieces, she didn't just pay me, she gave me the names of 5 other collectors. Within a year, my little shop wasn't a hobby anymore. It was an empire. I was consulting for auction houses, flying to Paris to verify the provenance of estate sales, and buying up junk that I knew was worth a fortune. But when I went home for Thanksgiving that year, oh, Elena, my mother sighed, looking at my calloused hands. You're still doing that manual labor? It's so unfeminine. Chloe is a junior executive now. She has an office with a view of the Hollywood sign. That's great, Mom, I said. I'm happy for her. I didn't tell her that the junior executive had called me 2 weeks prior, begging for $500 to cover her car payment. Don't tell Mom and Dad, Chloe had whispered over the phone. I just had some unexpected expenses. Networking is expensive, Elle. You wouldn't understand. You don't have a public life to maintain. I sent her the money, not because I loved her, but because I wanted to see how long she could keep the tightrope walk going. I was curious, like an actuary, calculating the risk of her eventual fall. I bought the Tribeca loft 6 months later. It was 3,000 square feet of brick, timber, and light. I paid cash. Standing in that empty space, looking out at the skyline, I realized that I had built a life that was entirely mine. No one in my family had a brick in this wall. No one had a cent in the mortgage. I felt powerful. But the next time I saw my father, he handed me a $20 bill and said, "Get yourself a nice dinner, Elena. I know things are probably tight in the city." I took the 20. I put it in my pocket next to my black American Express card. "Thanks, Dad," I said. "I appreciate the support." Is it just me, or is there something strangely satisfying about letting people underestimate you? There's a certain power in being the underdog while you're secretly the one holding all the cards. If you've ever played it cool while you were actually winning big, hit that subscribe button right now. We're about to get to the moment the two worlds finally collided, and it all started with a coat check. By the time I hit my late 20s, New York City had stopped being a scary place where I lived in a warehouse and had become my territory. I knew the rhythm of the city. I knew which subway cars were the least crowded at 3 in the morning, and I knew exactly which gallery owners were desperate enough to pay double my rate for a miracle restoration. My workshop in Long Island City was no longer just a room full of dust. It was a sanctuary. I had climate-controlled storage, specialized lighting, and tools that cost more than my sister's first 3 cars combined. But to my parents, to them, I was still the girl who messed around with old wood. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was hosting its annual gala for the Decorative Arts Department. This wasn't just a party, it was a gathering of the people who actually ran the world I worked in. These were the people who decided what was art and what was junk. And for the first time, I was invited. Not as a worker, not as a +1, but as a guest of honor. I had spent 6 months restoring a set of chairs that had belonged to Marie Antoinette, and the museum was unveiling them that night. I decided that was the night I was going to stop hiding, at least from myself. I spent a week on my outfit. I didn't go to a boutique. I went to my own collection. I had a vintage silk gown from the late 1940s, a deep midnight blue that looked like the ocean at dusk. It was stained and frayed when I bought it for $50 at an estate sale. But I had spent 30 hours, meticulously restoring every thread. I wore the emeralds I'd told you about, They weren't just jewelry. They were a piece of history I had saved from a fire in a Parisian apartment. When I stepped out of the black car in front of the museum, the flashbulbs were everywhere. I didn't look like the girl in the oversized sweater anymore. I looked like the woman who owned the room. I walked up the red carpet, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I stepped inside the great hall. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I spent the first hour talking to a billionaire from London, and the second hour explaining the chemical composition of 18th century varnish to the head of the Louvre. I was glowing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character. I was the center of the story. And then, I needed a drink of water. I walked toward the back of the hall, near the grand staircase. I was looking for the bar when I saw the line for the coat check. It was a long line, full of people who were impatient and entitled. And there, behind the counter, was a woman with her hair pulled back in a tight, messy bun. She was wearing a cheap, scratchy, black polyester vest. She was sweating. Her makeup was smudged, and she was frantically trying to find a misplaced mink coat for a very angry socialite. It was Chloe. My heart stopped. I didn't move. I just stood there, half hidden by a marble pillar, and I watched her. I watched my sister, the director of operations, the golden child, the girl who was supposedly meeting celebrities, get yelled at by a woman who looked like she'd never worked a day in her life. I told you, it's the silver tag, the woman screamed. Are you incompetent? Do you even know how much this coat costs? Chloe was trembling. I'm so sorry. Ma'am, I'm looking right now. I felt a surge of something. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even anger. It was disappointment. Not for Chloe, but for the lie my parents had been feeding me, and the lie they had been feeding themselves for years. I walked forward. I didn't mean to. My feet just moved. I reached the counter. The angry woman had finally grabbed her coat and stormed off, leaving Chloe leaning against the rack of coats, her eyes closed, her chest heaving. It's in the fourth row, under the letter V for Vance, I said. My voice was quiet, but in that hallway, it sounded like a gunshot. Chloe's eyes snapped open. She looked at me, and for 5 full seconds, she didn't breathe. She looked at my dress. She looked at my emeralds. And she looked at the guest of honor badge pinned to my silk lapel. Elena, she whispered. Her voice was thin, like paper. Hi, Chloe, I said. What are you doing here? She asked, her eyes darting around, terrified that someone would see us together. This is a private event. I know, I said. I'm one of the speakers. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her polyester vest, then back at my midnight blue silk. You can't tell them, she hissed, leaning over the counter, her face inches from mine. Elena, I'm serious. If you tell Mom and Dad about this, I will never forgive you. Tell them what, Chloe? I asked. That you're working? That you're actually doing something to pay your bills? There's no shame in working, Chloe. I've been doing it since I was 16. This isn't working, she snapped, her voice rising in a panicked vibrato. This is humiliating. I'm supposed to be someone. I told them I was a consultant for this event. I told them I was organizing the VIP lounge. So, you lied? I said. It wasn't a question. I had to, she cried, tears starting to track through her foundation. Do you know what Mom would do if she knew I was a coat girl? She'd lose her mind. She's spent her whole life telling everyone how perfect I am. I can't be the one who fails, Elena. That's your job. I felt a cold, sharp stone settle in my stomach. My job? I asked. You know what I mean, Chloe whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. You're the one who doesn't mind the struggle. You're the practical one. You're the one who can handle being nothing. I can't. I'm Chloe Vance. I'm the golden child. If I'm not winning, I don't exist. I looked at her, and I didn't see my sister anymore. I saw a hollow shell, held together by hairspray and my mother's expectations. I won't tell them, Chloe, I said. Her shoulders slumped. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you, Elle. Not for you, I said, turning to walk away. Because if I told them the truth, they'd find a way to make it my fault. They'd say I should have given you the money so you didn't have to resort to this. And I'm done being the person who fixes your mistakes. I walked back into the gala, back into the lights, back into the world where people knew my name for what I could do, not what I looked like, but as I stood there, listening to the applause. All I could think about was the Thanksgiving dinner that was only 3 weeks away. Whoa. Talk about a mask slip moment. Have you ever caught someone in a massive lie, but you decided to keep their secret just to see how much deeper they'd dig their own grave? Or maybe you were the one who had to hide the truth to keep the peace. Let me know in the comments. We are over 3,000 words into this story, and it's about to get even more intense. Make sure you're subscribed because the Thanksgiving showdown is next. The 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were suffocating. My mother called me every single day. She wasn't calling to ask about my life. Of course, she was calling to give me updates on Chloe's magnificent Hamptons estate. Oh, Elena, Chloe sent me pictures of the master bedroom, my mother chirped. It's all white linen and reclaimed wood. She says it's very organic, and she's having the entire dinner catered by a private chef. Can you believe it? Our little girl is finally living the life she was meant for. I sat at my workbench, surrounded by the smell of turpentine and old dreams, and I just listened. I didn't tell her that white linen and reclaimed wood were the standard staging furniture for high-end rentals. I didn't tell her that private chefs were available for hire by the hour for people who wanted to look like they had a staff. I just said, "That sounds lovely, Mom." "It is, dear, it is," she said. And Richard is so impressed. He's already talking about moving some of our investments into real estate, since Chloe has such a natural talent for it. He's even thinking about letting her manage a small portfolio for us. My blood ran cold. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea?" I asked. "Don't be jealous, Elena," she said, her voice turning sharp, the way it always did when I stepped out of line. "I know it's hard for you to see your sister succeed so quickly, while you're still tinkering in that garage of yours. But you have to be happy for her. She's a Vance. She's built for this." I hung up the phone, and I looked at my bank statement. I had over $2 million in liquid assets. I had a loft worth $3 million. I had a reputation that was priceless. And my parents were about to hand their retirement savings to a girl who is currently hiding in a coat check closet, crying into a polyester vest. I realized, then, that my silence wasn't just keeping the peace anymore. It was becoming dangerous. I called Chloe. "What?" she snapped, picking up on the fourth ring. I could hear the sound of city traffic in the background. "I'm busy, Elena. I'm at a meeting." "Chloe, Mom says Dad is going to give you money to manage," I said. "You have to tell them the truth. Now." There was a long, shaky silence on the other end of the line. I can't," Chloe whispered. "I already told them the investment was a sure thing. If I back out now, they'll ask questions. They'll want to see the paperwork." "Then show them the paperwork for the rental," I said. "Show them the credit card bills. Chloe, they're going to lose everything if you don't stop this." "No, they won't," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I'm going to make it work. I'll find a way. I'll win a big contract. I'll get a promotion. Just stay out of it, Elena. You've always stayed out of it. Why do you care now?" "Because I'm a Vance too," I yelled back, "and I won't watch you burn our parents' house down just to keep your golden child crown on straight." "You're just bitter," she spat. You've always hated that I was the favorite. You're just waiting for me to fail so you can finally feel special. Well, I'm not failing. I'm winning. And you're just the practical, boring, invisible sister who will never understand what it's like to be loved. She slammed the phone down. I sat in my loft, in the middle of all my practical success, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt visible. Too visible. I felt the weight of the truth, and it was heavier than any piece of furniture I'd ever restored. I decided, right then, that Thanksgiving wasn't going to be about turkey. It was going to be about demolition. Okay, things are getting really real. The tension is at an all-time high, and the golden child is officially playing with fire. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to decide between protecting someone's secret and protecting your family's future? What would you do in Elena's shoes? Drop your thoughts below. We are heading into the final stretch, the Thanksgiving dinner. And believe me, you are not ready for what happens at the table. The morning of Thanksgiving was gray and cold, the kind of New England day that makes you want to stay in bed with a wool blanket and a book. But I didn't stay in bed. I spent the morning in my workshop. I wasn't working on a chair. I was preparing. I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping. It was full of documents, printouts, and photos. I had the rental agreement for the Hamptons house. I'd found it on a public listing site. The summer rental B I'd mentioned. It was listed for $3,000 for the week. I had the records of the $500 transfers I'd made to Chloe over the last year. There were 12 of them. And, most importantly, I had a copy of the Metropolitan Museum Gala program, the one with my name listed as Lead Curatorial Consultant. I put them all in my bag. I didn't know if I'd use them. I hoped I wouldn't have to. I hoped, somewhere in her soul, Chloe would find the courage to be honest. I put on my disguise one last time. The old sweater, the worn-out jeans, the beat-up car. I wanted to see if they'd see me, or if they'd only see what they expected to see. The drive to the Hamptons took 3 hours. The traffic was a nightmare. But it gave me time to think. I thought about the time my mother forgot to pick me up from school because she was busy at Chloe's fitting. I thought about the time my father told me my little shop was a nice distraction from the real world. I thought about the way Chloe looked at me behind that coat check counter, terrified that her lesser sister would expose her. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the estate, my heart was as hard as a diamond. The house was beautiful, in that sterile, expensive, nobody lives here kind of way. There were no family photos on the walls. There were no books on the shelves. There was only a performance. My mother was in the kitchen, wearing an apron that probably cost more than my first month's rent. She was supervising the private chef, which mostly meant she was standing in his way and telling him how particular Chloe was about her gravy. "Elena, you're here," my mother called out, barely glancing at me as I walked in. "Put your coat in the foyer, and try not to drip on the rug. It's authentic Persian." "It's a machine-made reproduction from a warehouse in New Jersey, Mom," I said, softly. "But it's very nice." My mother froze. She turned around, her eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" she asked. "Nothing, Mom," I said. "Where's Chloe?" "She's in the library," my mother said, her voice turning cold. "She's taking an important business call. International. You know how it is, Elena. When you're at that level, the world doesn't stop for holidays." I walked toward the library. The door was cracked open. I could hear Chloe's voice. She wasn't talking to London. She wasn't talking to Tokyo. She was talking to a collection agency. "I told you, you'll get the payment on Monday," she was whispering, her voice frantic. "I just need a few more days. Please, don't call my parents. You can't call my parents." I pushed the door open. Chloe jumped, her phone nearly flying out of her hand. She looked at me, and for the first time, She didn't look like the golden child. She looked like a ghost. Get out, she hissed. I'm busy. Tell them, Chloe, I said. Get out, she repeated. The turkey is almost ready, I said, and Dad is in the living room with his checkbook. He told me he's moving $60,000 into your real estate fund tonight. 60,000, Chloe, that's half of what they have left. Chloe's eyes went wide. She looked at the floor, her fingers twisting the hem of her cashmere sweater. I'll pay it back, she whispered. I'll invest it. I'll make it grow. I just need a start, Elena. Everyone needs a start. That's not an investment, Chloe, I said. That's theft? It's not theft if they give it to me, she screamed. The sound echoed through the house. The library door swung wide, and there stood my mother and father. Is everything all right? My father asked, his brow furrowed, his checkbook actually in his hand. Chloe, why were you yelling? Chloe looked at me, her eyes full of a desperate, poisonous hatred. It's Elena, she said, her voice suddenly calm, perfectly controlled. She's having a breakdown, Dad. She's jealous. She's been saying the most horrible things to me. She's trying to ruin my dinner because she can't handle how successful I've become. My mother stepped forward, her face contorted in a mask of pure disappointment. Elena Vance, she said, her voice trembling with rage, I have tolerated your moods for years. I have tried to be patient with your struggle, but to come into your sister's home and try to tear her down on Thanksgiving? That is unforgivable. My father sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Elena, maybe you should go, he said. We can talk about this after the holidays, but right now, you're being disruptive. I looked at the three of them. My mother, the PR agent, my father, the actuary, and Chloe, the masterpiece of their own making. I reached into my bag. I'm not going, I said. Not until we look at the numbers. The checkbook is out, the lies are flying, and Elena is about to drop the folder of truth. This is it. The moment of no return. If you are Team Elena, type truth in the comments. If you think she's being too harsh, type messy. Either way, get ready. Because the next 5 minutes are going to change this family forever. I didn't pull the folder out immediately. I let the silence hang there, thick, suffocating, and heavy with the scent of pine needles and my mother's expensive floral perfume. I looked at my father, a man who had spent 40 years calculating risk, who could tell you the probability of a house fire or a car accident down to the 4th decimal point. And yet, he was standing there, prepared to hand over $60,000 of his life's blood to a phantom. Dad, I said, my voice low and steady, before you write that check, before you sign away your security for a dream that isn't yours, I need you to look at something. Elena, stop it! My mother hissed, her eyes darting toward the door as if the private chef might overhear our shame. You are embarrassing yourself. You are behaving like a jealous, petty child. I'm behaving like an actuary's daughter, Mom, I replied. I finally pulled the first paper from my bag. It was the rental listing for the very house we were standing in. I walked over and laid it on the mahogany desk, right next to my father's checkbook. This house, I said, pointing to the header, owned by a man named Arthur Henderson, listed as the Glass Retreat. It's a weekly rental. Chloe didn't buy this, Dad. She's renting it for $3,000. And if you look at the date on the agreement, it was signed 4 days ago. My father squinted. He reached for his glasses, sliding them onto the bridge of his nose with a hand that, for the first time I could remember, was shaking. He looked at the paper. He looked at the price. He looked at Chloe. Chloe? He asked. His voice wasn't angry yet. It was confused, like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have enough variables. What is this? Chloe's face didn't just go pale. It went gray. It's a temporary arrangement, Dad. The closing on the real house, the big estate, It got pushed back. I didn't want to disappoint Mom. I wanted us to have a beautiful Thanksgiving, so I rented this place as a preview. A preview? I asked. I pulled out the next set of papers. Then why is your credit card debt totaling $89,000, according to the collection notices you've been hiding in your car? And why did I have to send you $6,000 over the last 12 months, just so your utilities didn't get shut off in the city? My mother gasped. Elena, that is that is a lie. Chloe is a director. She makes she makes six figures. She makes $8 an hour plus tips at the Metropolitan Museum coat check, Mom, I said. I pulled out the photo I'd taken. A blurry but unmistakable shot of Chloe in her polyester vest, standing behind a rack of minks. I saw her there 3 weeks ago. She was being screamed at by a woman who didn't like the way she hung up her coat. The library went so quiet I could hear the clock on the mantel ticking. 1, 2, 3. My father's hand dropped to his side. The checkbook fell to the floor with a dull thud. He looked at the photo. He looked at his golden child. And then, he looked at my mother. Margaret, he whispered. Did you know? I, I, my mother stammered, her face twisting into a mask of pure panic. I knew things were tight. But Chloe said it was just a transition. She said she needed a little boost to get over the hump. She's a star, Richard. Stars have bad seasons. She's not a star, Mom, I said, and the words felt like they were being carved out of ice. She's a lie, and you've been the one holding the spotlight so no one could see the cracks. Chloe suddenly lunged for the papers on the desk, her manicured nails scratching against the wood. You ruined it, she screamed at me. You've been waiting for this. You've been stalking me, watching me, just waiting to tear me down because you're nothing. You're a carpenter, Elena. You're a glorified handyman. How dare you judge me? She turned to my father, her eyes wild. Dad, please, don't listen to her. She's twisted. I can fix it. If you just give me the 60,000, I can pay off the high-interest cards and I have a lead on a real estate deal in Florida. It's a sure thing, I promise. My father looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the prom queen, not the success story, but the liability. The Florida deal? He asked. Is that like the marketing firm in California? Or the consultancy in the city? Dad, I worked 42 years for that money, Chloe, he said. His voice was suddenly very old. I sat in a windowless office, calculating the cost of death and disaster, so you two could have a life. And you were going to let me throw it into a rental house fantasy? The truth is out. And the fallout is absolutely devastating. Have you ever seen someone so deep in a lie that they actually started believing it themselves? I want to see your thoughts in the comments. Was Elena right to drop the bomb on Thanksgiving? Or should she have waited? Type justice if you're with Elena, or too far if you think she ruined the holiday. We're moving into the final reveal, and it's about to get even bigger. My mother was sobbing now. Big, gasping heaves that ruined her perfect makeup. We were so proud, she wailed. Everyone talked about you, Chloe. Every time I went to the club, every time I saw the neighbors, they asked how you were. I couldn't tell them you were working a coat check. I couldn't. So you told them I was a failure instead? I asked. The question hit her like a physical blow. She stopped sobbing and looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. I never said you were a failure, Elena, she whispered. You didn't have to say it, Mom. You lived it, I replied. I reached into my bag one last time. I pulled out the Met Gala program and the deed to my loft. You told me my work was messy. You told me my hobby was a waste of time. You told me I was lucky to have free time while Chloe was busy running the world. I laid the program on top of the pile. I was the lead consultant for the museum gala where Chloe was checking coats. I was the guest of honor. I restored the Marie Antoinette collection, a project that earned me more in 6 months than Dad made in 5 years at the insurance firm. I laid the deed down. I own a $3 million loft in Tribeca. I have $2 million in the bank. I didn't tell you, not because I wanted to hide it, but because every time I tried to speak, you interrupted me to tell me what Chloe was doing. You didn't want a daughter who was successful, Mom. You wanted a daughter who made you look good. And since I didn't fit the golden child mold, you just erased me. My father picked up the deed. He read the address. He read the purchase price. $3,200,000. Cash. He looked at me, and the look in his eyes, it wasn't pride. It was shame. Elena, he whispered, why didn't you come to me? I did, Dad, I said. 3 years ago, I told you I was buying a property. You told me I should think smaller and asked if I needed help with my car insurance. You didn't even hear the price. You just assumed I was struggling. I looked at Chloe. She was slumped in the chair, her cashmere sweater looking cheap and flimsy under the library lights. She wasn't yelling anymore. She was just empty. I'm going now, I said. I picked up my bag. I left the papers on the desk. I didn't need them anymore. They were just clutter. Elena, wait, my mother cried. She stumbled toward me, reaching out a hand. We can fix this. We'll have a real dinner. We'll celebrate you. We'll tell everyone. We'll tell the neighbors about the museum. I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. I don't need the neighbors to know, Mom, I said. I needed you to know, and you chose not to. I walked out of the library. I walked past the private chef, who was standing in the hallway with a tray of appetizers, looking terrified. I walked out the front door, into the cold, gray Hamptons air. I got into my beat-up car, the disguise I'd worn for so long. And as I drove down the long gravel driveway, I saw the for rent sign in the bushes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned on the radio, and I started the long drive back to the life I had built for myself. The weeks after that Thanksgiving were quiet. My father didn't write the check. He didn't move the $60,000. Instead, he hired an independent auditor to look into their accounts. He discovered that my mother had leaked nearly $40,000 to Chloe over the previous 2 years. Money that was supposed to be for their medical fund and travel. Chloe was forced to move out of her estate 2 days after Thanksgiving. She didn't have a place to go, so she ended up back in her childhood bedroom, the one with the prom queen photos and the trophies on the shelf. The irony was suffocating. My mother, she couldn't face her friends. The golden child narrative had been her entire social currency. When the neighbors asked how Chloe's new home was, my mother had to lie or stay silent. She chose to stay home. I stayed in the city. I didn't block their numbers, but I didn't answer the calls either. I needed time to breathe. I needed to see if I existed to them without the money or the drama. One night, in the middle of January, my father called. I answered. Elena, he said. His voice sounded thin. Hi, Dad. I went to the museum today, he said. I saw the chairs, the Marie Antoinette ones. I didn't say anything. I just listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. They're beautiful, Elena, he whispered. I stood there for an hour, just looking at them. I read the plaque, Restoration by Elena Vance. I didn't realize how much precision it took. I didn't realize you were an artist. I'm an actuary's daughter, Dad, I said. I just calculate the risk of things falling apart, and I fix them before they do. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time, I believed him. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know, Dad, I said, but sorry doesn't fix the wood. It just acknowledges the crack. We hung up after that. It wasn't a happily ever after. It was just a start. Chloe eventually got a real job, not a director role, not a consultant role. She's working in the back office of a local hardware store, filing paperwork, making $17 an hour. She doesn't post on Instagram anymore. She doesn't wear cashmere. She's learning how to be practical. My mother, she's still struggling. She still tries to make every conversation about what could have been. But she's starting to learn that I'm not the one who's going to fix her life. As for me, I'm sitting in my loft right now. The sun is setting over the Hudson River, turning the brick walls of my home into a deep, glowing amber. I have a new commission, a set of 18th century desks from a castle in Scotland. It's going to take me a year to finish. And for the first time, I don't care if anyone is watching. Because I'm not the other daughter anymore. I'm not the background character. I'm the architect. And my life? It's majestic. Wow, what a journey. Elena's story is a reminder that you don't need anyone's permission to be great. If you've made it this far, thank you for being part of this experience. This was a long-form deep dive into family, secrets, and the power of being practical. If you want more stories like this, stories that actually take the time to breathe, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell. What should Elena do next? Should she let her family back in or keep her distance? Let me know in the comments below. If you're listening to this, and you're the one sitting in the corner at the family dinner, the one who everyone assumes is fine because you don't complain, I want you to know something. Silence isn't weakness. Being practical isn't a lack of ambition. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let them think you're nothing while you're building everything. Don't wait for them to celebrate you. Don't wait for the golden child to fail so you can have your moment. Your moment is right now. It's in every late night, every extra shift, every hobby that you turn into a craft. Elena Vance didn't win because she embarrassed her sister. She won because she didn't need to embarrass her sister to be happy. The truth at the dinner table wasn't a weapon, it was a liberation. And you deserve that same freedom. So, go out there, restore your own life, sand down the rough edges, fix the cracks. And when you're done, stand back and look at what you've built. It might be messy to them. It might be practical to them. But it's yours. And that is the greatest success of all. And that is the end of our story. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was a massive project, and I hope it gave you exactly what you were looking for. If you enjoyed the technical TTS formatting and the deep, conversational vibe of this American-style Reddit story, let me know. I'm always looking to improve and bring you the best content possible. Don't forget to share this video with someone who feels like they're living in a shadow. See you in the next one.